Hey everybody, and welcome to our live stream today on Wednesday. This is the one where we're going to be doing a ton of giveaways as well as try and answer some of your questions, and then we'll probably have a collaborative live show this Friday. So if you're looking forward to the collab, it should be some folks from TFL Car, I'm guessing. We don't know exactly who's going to be on there. Maybe someone from Carabuzz, probably our friends over at Redline Reviews. We'll see if we can get Sofian to bring his camera guy on as well. But before I go there, let's cover the things that are absolutely free to everybody. So the first thing you can do is you can send us a postage paid return envelope and we'll give you one of these stickers here. So again, there's an address down there in the description. You just do a return address envelope, put a stamp on it, otherwise it won't make it back to you, and then you pop that in the mail to the address that's down there in the description. It's a P.O. box. Due to the current pandemic, we're not checking that P.O. box very often, so be sure and get yours in. All those stamps will be going out probably sometime in June is my guess there. And then members get some extra benefits. Members also get some extra little 3D stickers here. These are suitable for putting on cars. If you want to put that on the back of your car, they're made out of the same material that some of those dealers' stickers are made out of. There's those available, and then we also have some lapel pins, which we will be giving out as well later in this episode, so be sure and stay tuned for all of that. If you want to go ahead and super chat or do all those sorts of things down there, you can do so, and we will obviously be prioritizing super chat questions over regular chat questions, since that's how these things work. So without further ado, let us dive into our first giveaway, which is the Rav4 Hitch. This was obviously a very narrow giveaway. We didn't really have too many people asking for this particular one. There were only about 15 people that wrote in and requested that they be added to this particular Rav4 raffle. Obviously, because you have to have a 2019 or 2020 RAV4 in order to qualify. So let's dig around, and we have a bag today here. We might give away one of these bags. Let's see. And we'll pull out one name. And this is Jim Heck from Nevada City. Congratulations, you have won an Eco Hitch for a 2019 to 2020 RAV4 hybrid. Or regular RAV4, and it looks like you have a RAV4 Hybrid Limited, so congratulations, you now have a hitch. Bear in mind you do have to supply your own wiring, and you will be installing it yourself, but that will be off to you, and we will email everybody that has won something in this episode, so that way you can get your prizes, and then we will go ahead and reset the bag here with the basket of different names. So, someone's asking what a giveaway is. It's where we give things away for free. All you have to do is write into itsaconspiracy@alexandautos.com. Unfortunately, this event has already been closed, but we'll probably have another one if the economy ever restarts and we collect more things to give away. So our next giveaway is a Honda hat. We have two of these actually, so we'll just pull two names out. Honda hats. So back into the bag. I lost my hat. I had a hat for this, but we have no hat anymore. Steve Albison, I'm sure I'm butchering names here, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Brian Murphy in Clemens, North Carolina. You just have won Honda hats. So hopefully we will not mix these items up as has happened in the past. So I will just go ahead and tape people's names on their giveaways as we pile them up on the desk. There we go. Now off to our first question. And if anybody is actually one that is on, you can always shout out. So let's see. Our first question from Dr. Dre. Dr. Dre. I thought he was dead. At any rate, well, that's according to Eminem. Will air suspension in the XC90 or other three-row SUVs with air suspension be noticeably more comfortable and road isolating than something like a Kia Telluride with regular steel spring suspension? That's an excellent question. It really depends on how the air suspension has been designed. There are performance vehicles that have air suspensions, interestingly enough, because they can be designed in multiple different ways. Generally, what's different with an air suspension, as we typically know it, versus a steel spring suspension, is that there's an airbag that's actually supporting the vehicle. So an air suspension setup, generally speaking, will remove the traditional dampers as well as the traditional springs in the vehicle. And the new air damper module provides both lift and support for the vehicle as well as motion damping. Now, depending on exactly how these systems have been designed, they can be designed to be very smooth, very cloud-like in their drive. That's something that we see in certain Mercedes models. Or they can be designed to be a bit more sporting in their intentions, and that's something that we see in certain Porsche vehicles with air suspensions. Volvo tends to fall somewhere in the middle. So the XC90 does not float on a cloud like you would expect a full large luxury vehicle to be. It's not going to ride like a Mercedes-Benz S-Class, but it is, generally speaking, more comfortable than the XC90 without the steel spring suspension. And in this particular setup, or comparison rather, I would say that the XC90 with that air suspension is more comfortable than a Telluride. The big benefit generally to adaptive suspensions, especially adaptive air suspensions, is that they can absorb large imperfections better than a steel spring suspension. The compression of the air allows a little bit more travel, and of course, since the adaptive functionality is there, it can adapt the damping to those particular road imperfections. Now, generally speaking, something like a hydraulic adaptive air suspension system, like we see in certain Mercedes models, we see in Citroens out there, etc., those are generally going to be the next level in comfort as far as maintaining that ultra smooth ride. But the XC90 does a good job of balancing that, I think. So if you're looking for comfort, I would say Telluride does well for itself in that segment. XC90 is going to be a little bit more comfortable, as would something like a BMW X5. The X5 actually has a really, really nicely done ride, and so does the Mercedes-Benz GLE in that segment there. So moving on here, IK, next super chat here, thanks for that. Ford Escape versus RAV4 hybrid. How much cheaper would the Ford have to be a contender? What, if anything, would I be giving up going with the Ford? That's an interesting question, actually. I have not had the Ford Escape hybrid here for a full review, unfortunately. I'm not exactly clear why it's taking Ford so long to get them out here. But I did like the Escape hybrid when I last drove it at its launch event. Now, I would argue that with the Escape hybrid, aside from a slight difference in performance, you're really not giving up much of anything versus the RAV4. The hybrid system has, honestly, a very similar overall design. The design of that system versus the design of the Toyota system is so close that that's why the two manufacturers ended up suing each other and then settling in the end. So as far as theory of operation, they're very, very similar. General reliability has also been pretty similar, as was seen in Ford's hybrid products that they've had on the market for well over a decade at this point. The big difference is going to be in weather performance. So the RAV4 hybrid has an electric rear axle. The Escape hybrid has a mechanical rear axle. Now that means that the Escape hybrid is going to be less efficient because there are going to be more mechanical losses. That rear axle adds extra weight to the vehicle versus the electric motor setup that we see in the RAV4. But the counterpoint to that would be improved weather performance. So whether you're talking about snow performance, ice performance, wet weather performance, mud traction, etc., the Escape is going to be more sure-footed because it uses a traditional all-wheel drive system, whereas we see the electric rear-wheel drive system in the RAV4. It's just not going to feel quite the same. Deals are, of course, critically important because the pricing on the Ford Escape hybrid is a little bit differently laid out than the RAV4, and depending on exactly how you compare it, it may be more expensive. But I think that rational average transaction price on the dealer lot is probably going to be lower with the Escape hybrid. And then very lastly, I would say that the RAV4 is a little bit more practical than we see in the Ford, just as far as the overall interior spaciousness and the way that the cargo area is laid out. There are definitely some advantages to the RAV4 hybrid. I would be pretty torn between the two. And for me, I think that it would just come down to the deal that you might get on the Ford. So with that out of the way, let's dive into another giveaway. Let's pull another name out of the magic bag. And let's see what we have here. Oh dear, I don't have a name on this one, but I'm sure we can figure this out from the email. This is someone that lives in Sandy Springs, Georgia, and you have just won a Jeep hat. So I'm sorry for that. Everybody will be emailed later this afternoon or tomorrow about their prize, and then we will email them or mail them all out via U.S. Postal Service by Monday of next week. So that's the plan there. Moving along here, we have a new member. So thanks, Ricky, for joining. Be sure and follow those instructions on the membership thing so we can send you out your lapel pin, stickers, all that sort of stuff. And move along here. When will the Ford Escape plug-in hybrid vehicle be available out in the U.S.? I see plenty of overseas test drives, nothing domestically in the U.S. That is an excellent question, and it has undoubtedly been hampered by the coronavirus shutdown, so we don't really know exactly when that will be. The Escape plug-in hybrid was supposed to have been on sale, I believe, actually, either by now or very soon after now. But we don't know when that's going to be. So I would expect at this point that it's going to be probably in the fall. So if you need one right now, you may have to just get something else. Moving along here. Any new minivans worth keeping an eye out for? Victor Hugo. So, Victor, I would say that the Pacifica redesign or refresh rather, is probably worth keeping an eye out for. Recently, ZF and Chrysler and the whole FCA envelope, I should say, seems to have done a lot of work on the 9-speed automatic transmission. And I have to say that the last Jeep Cherokee we drove, which was about 2 weeks ago, the review is coming out here very soon, the 9-speed was a non-issue. I was honestly blown away because the 9-speed has been so odd shifting and odd feeling over its entire tenure, whether we're talking about one in a Jaguar or a Land Rover or an Acura or a Honda or a Fiat, a Jeep, a Chrysler, etc. They've been so funky that I haven't been a huge fan. But the last one we drove was a non-issue. Shockingly enough, I don't know if there were any physical changes. I've reached out to FCA. I have yet to see an answer come back in my inbox. Hopefully we will have an answer by next week, which is the deadline we gave them to respond before the video goes live. But it was totally fine. I was amazed. So at this point in time, I would say the Pacifica has no complaints. I would probably get the hybrid Pacifica, to be perfectly honest, though. I think that is the real winner in the minivan area right now. 30 miles easily of electric range, reasonable performance afterwards, excellent fuel economy. The hybrid system, we don't know too many of the final details about how it works inside as far as who's making it, but the rumor mill is that it's actually manufactured by Aisin, which would make sense because FCA is not really interested in building their own internal components that way. And Aisin is, of course, the company that makes the Prius and Camry hybrid transmissions. So that's the rumor mill there. Moving on from that, we do expect to see a all-hybrid or at least mostly hybrid minivan lineup from Toyota in the new Sienna, but details are really sketchy. So if you need your minivan this year, I would say 2020 calendar year, then you're probably going to want to get something else. And at the moment, obviously the best minivan really, in my opinion, is the Chrysler minivan. If you can wait until 2021 calendar year, probably I would say middle of that year, so at least 12 months out from today, then the Toyota minivan might be an interesting option. But the current generation Sienna definitely feels really behind compared to the Odyssey or the Pacifica. Moving along here, would you get a Tesla Model Y or an XC60 T8 at a similar price point? Ooh, that's an interesting question. I would say it really depends on what you expect out of your crossover. The Model Y is arguably not really a crossover or SUV. It's arguably a pregnant liftback. It has much less ground clearance than the XC60, which is not Tesla's fault necessarily. It's the only way you're going to get that kind of fuel economy and range out of an electric vehicle that size, is they have to be relatively close to the ground. They have to have that liftback profile. If you had an XC60, for instance, or an XC90, that was a full EV with that same battery pack and even the same motors, if you just simply dumped that under a Volvo body, there's no way it would have the range and efficiency that we see in Teslas. That's why the Model X and the Model Y really are that sort of more flowing coupe-like shape. Unfortunately, that ends up taking a hit when it comes to practicality. So the cargo area is not going to be a square. Headroom, you're going to see different realities there. Although the Model Y does very well when it comes to rear headroom because of that glass roof, and we don't have steel, then an insulating layer, an air layer, and then the headliner, etc. If you are looking for a vehicle that's pure EV, obviously it's going to be just the Tesla. If you're looking for something that has the gasoline safety net, then the Volvo is going to be an excellent option. When it comes to safety, there's a lot of fast talk going on here. Teslas are unquestionably safe. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But if I were to put my money on the line on a new vehicle in terms of overall safety, I would probably go with Volvo. They've been in the safety business an awful lot longer. The XC60 has a number of safety features that we don't see standard on the Tesla at this point. City safety definitely takes things to a different level than we see in the Tesla model lineup. No, not all of that is standard on the Volvo, mind you, of course, but most things you'll find on the XC60 T8. And Volvo also has a really long history of doing safety differently. They take a lot of real-world safety data that they have collected over decades and decades and decades, and all of that goes into their new product decisions and their new product designs. That is why you see that Volvo is really the only company out there that consistently scores well on new government-mandated tests, even in vehicles that were not designed for that test. So, for instance, when the U.S. government decided that safety standards should include side impact standards or frontal offset standards or lower speed or higher speed standards, the small overlap tests, etc. Volvo is really the only manufacturer, aside from Mercedes possibly, that has had models that have consistently scored extremely well, even though nothing changed. And other manufacturers scrambled to try and catch up, and Volvo was just like, nah, nothing needs to be changed. Even though the product is 10 years old, it'll be just fine. So moving along here, what are our thoughts on the Volkswagen Arteon? I like the Arteon. I wish it was a little less expensive, since it is really not that far removed from the Volkswagen Passat in terms of overall design and overall engineering. I'd kind of hoped that it wouldn't be that much more expensive, and it does end up a little bit pricey. Now, admittedly, you're probably going to get more cash on the hood of the Arteon than some of the competition, but I would say that in that segment right now, the Kia Stinger would be my choice. And I see that someone there is disappointed that Kia will not continue the Stinger, and those rumors seem to be unfounded because Kia's actually been testing a refreshed Stinger. And so I don't expect that to actually be canceled in the United States. We haven't really heard any official word on that. Let's just double check here, see if there's anything here. There has been, again, the rumor, of course, that it's going to go on the ropes, but there are a lot of conflicting rumors. And the one that I put a little bit more weight on is the fact that Kia has been testing the new 2.5-liter and new 3.5-liter turbocharged engines. So if my money were on the line, I think that the Stinger is going to continue and that it will actually get the new engines from the Genesis product line. So expect more power, unless their sales go really, really crazy wrong because of the pandemic. Obviously, something could change here. Let's see here, moving on. Ryan C., thanks for the super chat here. I'm on my second 5th gen Outback. What other options should I look at to replace it? Mercedes GLB looks interesting. What else? I like reliability, versatility, some fun to drive, and comfortable seats. Well, I would say if you're looking for reliability, then I would generally steer away from luxury brands other than Lexus and Acura, possibly BMW, sometimes Mercedes, but generally only with their more volume products, and stay away from their performance products, I would say, generally speaking. Those are going to be more reliable. 5th gen Outback, I would say you can look at, or you'd do well to look at something like the Hyundai Santa Fe. I think that's a very similar value proposition to the Outback. Pricing is relatively similar to the Outback profile. It's in that same sort of mid-size 2-row segment. There are lower horsepower engine options. I'm not sure if you have the turbo or the V6. I believe Gen 5 was just the V6. So if you have the V6, you might want to look at the turbo Santa Fe. The Outback is an odd entry in that group because it has a much less expensive, less powerful engine option than, say, the Honda Passport or the Jeep Grand Cherokee or most of that grouping of mid-size 2-row crossovers. There's also going to be a Toyota Venza coming out soon that's going to be hybrid only, so if you're willing to wait, that could be an interesting option. that will obviously be prioritizing fuel economy over overall off-road ability. But off-road ability, honestly, is going to be pretty similar in most of the entries in that group. So I would look at Santa Fe definitely for sure now. Perhaps Toyota Venza if you're looking for reliability. Fun to drive. Then I would focus on entries like the Chevy Blazer is actually pretty fun to drive in that segment, and it's a larger vehicle that's probably going to have a decent amount of a decent amount of cash on the hood. Let's see, moving on over here. What do you see as the future of hybrid drivetrain architecture in terms of parallel, series, power split, and applications of each? That's an interesting question. We don't know too much about what manufacturers are coming up with as far as future technologies go. A lot of manufacturers will just say there's a hybrid coming, but they won't talk about what's going on underneath the hood. I suspect that we will see a continuation of parallel hybrids, and we aren't really going to be seeing too many serial hybrids other than some of the Nissan product line that we see coming up soon. The main reason for that is serial hybrids are generally a little bit less efficient than a parallel hybrid system. And some manufacturers think that that's not a problem. So when we take a look, for instance, at some of the Infiniti hybrids that they're coming up, Infiniti was obviously looking at efficiency as one of the metrics that they were considering, but they were pretty upfront in saying that it wasn't the only metric that they were interested in, and they're willing to give up a little bit of efficiency in order to have that more EV drive characteristic. So that is one of the benefits of a true serial hybrid, is that it drives like an EV and feels like an EV, because it is an EV. It's just a different kind of battery, essentially, on the back end. The downside to that is relative efficiency. The parallel hybrid systems that we see out there, they generally feel either like a traditional vehicle because they use a traditional automatic or DCT, and they're just going to give better fuel economy in those systems, or they're a planetary power split style system like we find in FCA's hybrids, in the Chrysler Pacifica hybrid, the Prius, the Camry, the RAV4, Highlander, etc., General Motors hybrid systems, as well as Ford's hybrid systems in their smaller vehicles. And those have a feel that is somewhere between an EV and somewhere between a vehicle with a CVT because of their nature of operation. But generally speaking, they tend to be more efficient in a wider variety of driving situations, especially higher speed driving and city driving. They tend to really excel in those two situations. So moving along here, is Nissan actually moving to a 9-speed transmission? Your thoughts? I'm not sure which vehicle you're speaking of. They are moving to a 9-speed automatic transmission in rear-wheel drive applications only. So that would be the Titan pickup truck, the Frontier pickup truck, likely the Armada at some point will get the 9-speed automatic transmission unless it disappears. Some of the Infiniti product line, if it stays around long enough, will likely get a 9-speed automatic. It depends on how much cash there is available inside the Nissan and Infiniti conglomerate for some of those updates. But as far as front-wheel drive vehicles, no. There's no likelihood that we have seen that the Pathfinder, that the Rogue, or anything along those lines will get a 9-speed automatic transmission. There isn't one available to them unless they were to reach out and start buying the ZF 9-speed or the General Motors and Ford 9-speed. And we haven't really seen any Nissan, GM, Nissan, Ford arrangements, and we definitely have never seen any ZF Nissan arrangements to that level. Nissan has typically gone for in-house designs created by Jatco. Jatco is their almost captive transmission company. Nissan owns more of Jatco actually than Toyota owns of Aisin, so they're definitely more involved in Jatco's transmission development. And unless Jatco's going to be doing it, Nissan's really not going to be putting it in a volume product. With that out of the way, let's move on to some more giveaways here. So we'll rifle around, and we will be giving away an Infiniti Thermos here. And this is going to Randy Curry in Grand Rapids, Michigan. This is an Infiniti Thermos that has Spaceport America right there on it. So we'll pop that right over there. And then we'll give away another one. We'll give away a Porsche Taycan, or Taycan, depending on how you want to pronounce that. This one is going to Raj Iyer in Red Bank, New Jersey. So those will again be going out next Monday, hopefully. So moving along here, let's pull another question out of the bag. Thanks to everybody that has super chatted here, and thanks to all the members, of course, for joining us. Let's see here. Mention the 2021 Venza. Have you seen it? No, nobody has seen the Venza really yet. There have been some very, very disguised spy shots, but nothing concrete, obviously. So we don't know exactly what it's going to look like. If I had to guess, I'm going to guess that it's going to look like a mini Highlander, but Toyota surprised us, I think, with the Highlander itself in that it didn't look like a bigger RAV4. So the RAV4 definitely has the trucky look going on, and the Highlander has a much more elegant, more Lexus-like look to it. So since the Venza is going to logically slot between the two, but be mostly a hybrid vehicle, as far as we know, it may be entirely hybrid as far as its engine lineup goes. I suspect it may be more on the Highlander side, more of the luxurious design, softer suspension, etc., less off-road oriented, less off-road capable than something like a RAV4 Adventure or TRD. So that's my guess there. Moving on here, Nathaniel's asking, when I hop out of my 2015 Chrysler 200 into any Honda or Toyota, the doors and structure feel very tinny and hollow. Why is this? It's just the design. There's really no logic behind it. Sometimes manufacturers will use different grades of steel, but generally speaking, for crash structure reasons and perforation warranties, etc., the steel is nearly identical. And there's your door in your Chrysler 200 is not going to be any heavier or any lighter than a comparable product from a Japanese competitor. They just have a different sound. It's just sort of like, why does this cup sound differently than that cup? This just has to do with the overall construction. Some manufacturers seem to spend a little bit of time crafting the way doors sound when they close. Some don't. Some stumble upon it by happenstance. Some don't. It really has no relative bearing on durability or reliability or fit and finish quality, etc. It just is, I guess. Let's see here. Drew is asking, why do Hyundai and Kia give you more for less in their vehicles? For instance, Telluride and Palisade, top end, or significantly less. Vertical integration, maybe. So, Drew, that's an excellent question. Vertical integration is definitely one of the reasons that we see good value going on in the Korean brands. But we also see manufacturers that are deliberately trying to grow their sales. So, Toyota and Honda generally... And you can see this in the way that they position themselves, in the way that they market themselves, and also the way that their PR people interact with us in the press. Toyota and Honda know that they're the king of the hill as far as the brands go for dependability, reliability, brand perception, etc. They definitely have established brands that have been there a long time. And Hyundai and Kia both tend to come at this from a very underdog point of view. They know that they've been the scrappy newcomer that has to fight for everything. And so they seem to be willing to be more aggressive in putting out high-value products and attempting to change things regularly. So these are brands where, oddly enough, they will try and make more substantial changes between regular product cycles than we see in Toyota and in Honda for this particular reason. So they're really trying to claw up the ladder. Now, some of the relative savings does come, obviously, in the vertical integration. Hyundai is a massively vertically integrated company. They can mine the ore in certain areas. They buy raw materials. They will make the steel. They can punch the steel, they can make the car, they can sell the car and distribute it, etc. But also remember that Toyota is a very vertically integrated company as well. Honda a little less so, but still more than some companies out there, more than smaller companies like Mazda, for instance. So some of this also comes in the way that Hyundai and Kia decide to bundle things together. So you'll notice that we don't have 2 engine options or 3 engine options in the Telluride and Palisade. We have 1 engine option, 1 transmission option. They love option packages with reduced options and features that you can select. So bundling things saves them cash. That's why, for instance, unfortunately, if you want a top-end Telluride, you can only get it with black wheels, which I think is honestly stupid. I would really rather we didn't have black wheels on the top-end model, but that's not an option. I would also rather that we didn't have boring colors, to be honest, in the Telluride. I find the color palette a little bit drab because there are so few options and none of them are bright red or bright blue or anything along those lines. No cheery colors. They're all sort of jewel tones. But this all plays to their desire to streamline inventory, streamline the production and distribution channels, and keep options and feature packages as limited as possible. Kia and Hyundai will both do sort of the mainline options, and then they will toss in an everything package, which I actually think is the right way to do this. So rather than having 10 different options here and there, they'll just toss everything into that one package, and either you want it or you don't. You either climb up that ladder all the way to that package or not. Now, that can mean that folks that are interested in just one option have to spend more, but it helps them maintain that value pricing and value proposition. So that's typically what we see there. And then in general terms, in the past, we've also seen some corner cutting going on. And every manufacturer has to corner cut. This is nothing unique to the Koreans. But I think that the Korean manufacturers have done a good job at picking the right corners to cut. So we will see things in Korean vehicles like the driver gets a ventilated seat, but the passenger doesn't. You can get hard plastics strategically placed. So they'll cut the dashboard in half and put hard plastics away from the driver's reach, but that saved them some money, that sort of thing. They will put lower quality materials in the back than in the front in some vehicles. They'll swap out components from other world markets. So if we take a look at the Kia Rio, for instance, the absolute base version of the Kia Rio gets interior plastics that are harmonized with South America, whereas the interior plastics in the rest of the lineup in the Rio are harmonized with Europe. So they're more premium materials, but that helps drive the price point down. And all of that goes into play. Whereas if we take a look at, for instance, say Ford Fiesta, the entire interior, generally speaking, was at one consistent level. And that means that perhaps the base entries were not profitable, but the upper end models were. And then they had to compromise on the materials to find a happy medium. So I think that they do a good job at that. Anyway, let's move along here. Steel's identical. Have you seen the rocker panels of a Ford Focus lately? It depends on the model. So comparatively, similar model to similar model, there really is less structural difference than some people think. When you actually take out the micrometer, you rip open the body panels, there is not a vast difference because of modern crash test standards in most of the body panels in a unibody car, because the body panels are structural, so we really don't see too much difference there. You will see some differences in parts that don't matter, hoods, trunk lids, things like that, but generally speaking, not as much as there once were. Let's put it that way. Let's move on here. Will Nissan ever turbocharge their 2.5-liter four-cylinder? I'm going to go with probably not. Not in the current environment. Let's put it that way. And without that out of the way, let's move on to another giveaway here. Rifle around in the bag. See what we get here. Donald Campbell of Flowood, Mississippi. You have won a Hyundai insulated metal coffee mug there. So pop that over here. And it's time to pull another one out of the bag. This one is going to be for a Ram insulated container with a Texas logo on it. And since I accidentally pulled out two names, we'll give that one to Alan in Osgood, Ohio. Sorry, you're not in Texas, unfortunately. I should have pulled out a Texas person if I could have. And then this one is a Ford Mustang Mach-E Thermos. I really like that one. That's kind of a cool design. And this one is going to Ming Chi in Overland Park, Kansas. So thank you for watching there. And moving along to the next question here. Do you know how manufacturers decide to configure cars during the production processes and what to install from the factory, what colors, trims, how many of each, etc.? Ooh, that is a very interesting question. And very complicated. So a lot of thought goes into that. Manufacturers spend a great deal of time figuring out production strategies. Years and years go into this. A lot of it tends to go down the line of what sold well in the previous generation. Obviously, that factors into a lot of decision making. But if it's a completely new vehicle, manufacturers are often running blind. And that is where we see kind of odd choices sometimes, because nobody's got the magic wand here. And I would say some of the things that we see definitely with that would be, let's see, what's a good example here? I think the Korean companies actually are a good example on this one, because they're obviously newer to the market than the established players, Ford, General Motors, FCA, Toyota, Honda, etc. And even though Ford, Toyota, Honda, etc. will create new models from now and then, they're more of a slow rollout process, whereas the Koreans have started just 20 years ago with nothing. And now they're attempting to create sports cars and performance cars, etc. So, for instance, when the Kia Stinger launched, I thought some of their decision-making process was a little funny. Some of the options that they didn't bring to the U.S., that they did bring to the U.S., the way that they packaged things, I think could have been a little bit better. And they've adjusted that over time. As to how many units to make, sometimes this is a decision-making process to deliberately keep products desirable. So, for instance, Honda is not producing very many Civic Type Rs. We actually just got one dropped off today. So, as hard as you might want, Honda said there are only going to be a certain number, and that's their decision to keep that model desirable. Whereas other car companies will just build as many as you want. And that can sometimes hamper resale value or dealer pricing structure. So, for instance, at the moment, the Veloster N seems to be having an oversupply. We also seem to have a bit of an oversupply in some regions of GLIs and GTIs because those manufacturers will build as many as they want. Other manufacturers will tend to just flood the production channel with whatever they can get away with and see what happens. We see that a little bit more with the American companies. Moving on here, PMO Morph is asking, does ZF 9-speed actually cut power completely during 4, 5, and 7/8 dog clutch shifts, or does it maintain torque and synchronize the clutches by slipping other clutches? Generally speaking, it is cutting power, and the reason that it has to do that is that that's the only way you can engage a positive engagement clutch this way. They have to monitor exactly the rotations and the orientations of these fingers and engage them. And there really would be no point in wearing out the other clutches prematurely. So power does have to get severely limited, and limited enough just so that you can make these things rotate right, and then we engage as quickly as possible, and then off you go. So that is why those transmissions generally feel a little bit different. But I have to say, in their latest software update, again in the Jeep Cherokee and in the Compass that we've driven recently, it was shockingly night and day better than the last 9-speed that we drove most recently in the Honda Passport. So hopefully Honda is getting the software update that FCA and ZF have clearly worked on. We don't know whether that is the case, of course, because FCA is building the 9-speed themselves, and they do have seemingly more control over this, it seems like, than Honda does. So I'm not entirely clear what's going on there. And it's worth noting that we have been told by both FCA and Honda that the software is not identical. Clearly they're running off the same baseline software package from ZF, but they're changing it to their own desires and their own needs, and it's not identical. Let's see here, moving on. I asked because online car configurators only work as a suggestion. Mostly you end up either waiting months or getting whatever the dealer has on lot. So car configurers, yes. So the general purchasing dynamic in the US is different than it is in Europe, which is part of why we see European cars with so many standalone options. In the US, the vast majority of cars are purchased off the lot. So generally speaking, outside of the luxury segment, mainstream cars, you're going to find packaged things rather than standalone options. So inventory can be kept better controlled because only so many people are going to want a blue car with option A, C, D, Z, and whatever. So they try and create an average configuration that they can have sitting there on the dealer lot. In other countries around the world, especially in Europe, they're much more willing to say, I want these things, build me the car, it will ship, and there's less dealer inventory hanging around. So they're just two sides of the coin there. If you do want to order something, most manufacturers will do that for you. A lot of dealers will try and steer you to one that's already on the lot because they may get a bigger kickback on that. But you can order just about anything. For instance, when we ordered the RAV4, it took months and months and months and months and months and months to arrive. And that is definitely the downside. So moving on here. Any news on the Jeep Grand Cherokee 3-row? Not yet. We will probably know more about that later this summer. I know that all manufacturers are struggling with what do we do about launch events? How do we roll out new products? I just had 2 Supras in my driveway because that launch event had to get canceled. That's also why we had the review of the Hyundai Sonata Hybrid at an odd time. And why upcoming here, we're going to have a review on a Honda Civic Type R, and the motion sensor in my room has just turned the light off. So I don't know exactly when we're going to see some of these new products roll out, but there's a lot that is stuck in the pipeline as far as that goes. We were also supposed to be going to a Porsche event, a Buick event, a Chevy event, a Cadillac event. All that got canceled or moved, so we'll see here. Moving along here, we'll do some giveaways, so we'll pull out several names here and just go with these in order. So the next item is yet another Honda hat. Honda loves giving out hats, apparently. And this one is going to Bruce Chung in Diamond Bar, California. So Bruce, hopefully you like Honda, because that is the hat we have. And then the next one is Tim Lynch in Plymouth, Wisconsin. And you are getting an H2 Go from, Toyota, GR Supra. So there you go. It's great. That was a bad joke, I'm sorry. And that is going to Tim Lynch. So hopefully some of these people are watching here. MQ Nguyen, how to enter the giveaways. Those were announced in previous live shows and on facebook.com/AlexandAutos. There's an email address that you can email. And you can actually email today. So anybody that's watching now, if you want to get entered in our next live show, which will probably be months away, mind you, so definitely a while, you can email itsaconspiracy@alexandautos.com, and you will be entered in our next giveaway. All the emails there just get added to the list. We print out everybody on a little ticket, and then we literally raffle them out of a bag. So that's how that goes. Next one is another Ram Thermos, and this is going, somehow we have 2 entries there. Did I have 2 entries? We do. Uh-oh. Double entry. Caught it. Next. Okay. Please don't double entry. It increases our workload. Brian from Clifton, New Jersey. Brian Ropp, you have won this Ram Thermos here. And we'll pop that over to the side. Now, another question here. Let's see here. PMO is saying that FCA filed for patent modification of ZF9 speed where they replaced one of the dog clutches with a friction clutch. Yes, that is correct. We don't know whether that's in production yet. And the other question we don't know is whether it's affecting the torque capacity of the transmission. So hopefully we will know soon. I've asked for, again, detailed questions about that. The part numbers and everything appeared the same. So I'm assuming it was just a change to the software. Let's see here. Moving along here. I noticed a question that seemed interesting, but now I have totally lost it. What's your take on SUVs going to rear-wheel drive platforms? I think it's kind of an interesting move, especially for the Explorer. We'll see how it goes for Ford. We don't really see that much of a move from anybody else, though, because the Pathfinder rumor mill is still saying that it's probably still going to be front-wheel drive from what we've seen. All the data that we've been able to see is front-wheel drive, front-wheel drive, front-wheel drive. So the Explorer seems to be the only one that has moved that direction. It is possible that the next generation Mazda CX-9 could go rear-wheel drive because of their new Mazda 6 platform, but we really don't know. It does look like the Durango is staying rear-wheel drive, and then we have the Explorer, etc. So the main benefit is the ability to handle more power. Packaging-wise, it is difficult, but not impossible, to make a front-wheel drive transmission that can handle that much torque. And that is why we see, for instance, the Ford Explorer with the 2.3-liter engine be so fast compared to the previous generation Explorer Sport that theoretically supposedly had more power. The reality is the 2.3 in the rear-wheel drive Explorer can actually deliver all that power in all 10 of its gears, whereas the old Explorer really couldn't in first gear, probably second gear, possibly even was still limited in third gear, just to reduce the likelihood that the transmission will shred itself or will overheat or damage some of the other components. There really are very, very few front-wheel drive transaxles that can handle more than 300 pound-feet of torque. And really, the only ones that are there that can handle a bit more are the ones from Ford and General Motors that made some tweaks, but not in the first and second gears, their older series of transmissions. And then we see the Mercedes-Benz dual-clutch transmissions that are in their AMG products. Longevity is clearly going to be a concern with any of those high horsepower transaxles. To be honest, I would probably put a little bit more faith behind longevity in the GM and Ford transaxles than the Mercedes DCT, because the Mercedes DCT is really putting an awful lot of power through a relatively small transaxle footprint. And how long that will last, we just don't know. I'm expecting clutch replacements at some point in their future. So let's see here, moving on here. Do you think an aluminum unibody SUV is as safe as steel? This is an interesting question, ATX. So that is definitely a yes. And the main reason for that is that aluminum deforms more predictably than steel. So it is actually arguably easier to design an aluminum safety cell that will deform in specific ways than a steel safety cell. And that's exactly why we saw in the 80s and 90s a number of luxury vehicles, especially Volvo, for instance, that had aluminum crash structure components in them. So, for instance, Volvo 240s, for instance, had an aluminum safety beam up front. And that's because of the way that aluminum is known to deform. It's just a more predictable thing to use. It's a little bit easier to do the math. So aluminum is not a problem as far as safety goes. The only problem with aluminum is the cost. Aluminum is more expensive than steel. So moving along here. What's your take on, that we already answered that question. Do you think it's a good idea for Mazda to go premium? I don't see why not. They need to do something, and maybe premium will help them, because their sales definitely are a problem. Mazda has got a lot of headwinds going there, and hopefully they'll figure it out. I think it's a shame because, honestly, Mazdas are beautiful. And what always strikes me as funny is that when you look at survey reasons for why people buy cars, generally speaking, styling is at the top of the list. Oftentimes, depending on the survey you're looking at, oftentimes styling will actually exceed safety and performance and practicality. So people would rather buy, in general terms, a beautiful car versus a safe car versus a more reliable car versus a more efficient car, etc. And so I'm shocked on why Mazda just doesn't have better sales. Go figure. There's some dealer issues. There's some obviously some product lineup issues, and I would say that Mazda's also had a bit of a problem with performance lately. They used to claim they were the Zoom Zoom brand. And Zoom Zoom has meant a little bit less and less lately in a lot of generations for a wide variety of very pragmatic reasons. But they're still beautiful cars. They're comfortable. They're easy to live with, etc. I have a feeling that they may end up getting acquired by someone is probably the most logical course of action here. We do see a lot of tie-ups with Toyota. And the rumor mill is, this is a wild rumor mill here, of course, but the rumor mill here is that if Mazda starts to fail, that the Japanese government is going to want them to have a tie-up more firmly with Toyota. So whether that's a Toyota acquisition, we don't know, but it would not be out of the question. That's probably why we saw Nissan buying Mitsubishi. It was partially orchestrated by the Japanese government. So exactly how that will play out with Subaru and Mazda, if either of those manufacturers fail, we don't really know. But it's probably Toyota that's got to come up with the cash. So moving along here, have we heard any potential of Toyota Sienna Hybrid or Sienna Prime? Sienna Hybrid, yes. Sienna Prime, very unlikely at this point from what we have been told. Moving on here, so manufacturer like VW... What manufacturer is like VW of the 2000s is willing to design crazy models similar to making the Phaeton or Volkswagen Touareg? Drew, I would say that if we're looking at crazy, the crazy manufacturers right now would be FCA and a little bit of crazy probably to the Hyundai Kia Motor Group. We don't see too much crazy coming from more stable, more mainline brands, I would say. Ford likes fun cars, GM likes making fun cars, so does Toyota, of course, but crazy is something that seems to be left towards the underdogs in the automotive landscape. So that's what I would say there. Nathaniel's asking when our next live show will not be for months. No, our next giveaway won't be for months because the way that these giveaways work generally is whenever we attend launch events, sometimes manufacturers will give the press little giveaways, little I don't know what you want to call them, They say, hey, welcome to the Supra. Here's a Supra water bottle. And we don't accept any of those here at Alex and Autos. We just store them up. They literally just end up piling up on the shelves behind me and in this room, and then we give them away. But if I'm not going to be attending live events for months, then I don't have much to give away. Manufacturers will oftentimes give away hats. They'll say, there's an event and it's in the sun. Here's a hat to protect yourself. So we just grab hats and then give them away here. And Honda seems to love giving away hats. So that's that. But there will be live shows aside from giveaway events, of course, over the coming few months, but not with giveaways because they have to collect. So moving along here, let's pull some more names out of the hat, and we'll pour some more widgets, random things here. So we have some JBL headphones. These are wireless ones. That's kind of cool. They're wireless earbud things with magnetic cable management and some sort of funky loop. So that's what they look like right there. Anyway, those are going to Ron Barber from Wooded Lake Drive in San Jose, California. So thanks for sticking your name in the pile. We then have a Duluth Grill cookbook. I think this was a Ram event that happened in Duluth, Minnesota. So hopefully someone from Minnesota is going to like this. Let's see. Oh, sorry, Illinois. So Muhammad from Rolling Meadows, Illinois is getting a Duluth cookbook. I think it focuses heavily on barbecue. We then have a Thermo Fisher Scientific water bottle. That is going to a Tony Chung in Fremont, California. So thanks for watching. Put that over there. Oh, and there's one more. Another Taycan Thermos here. And that is going to Michael Chan in Lewis Center, Ohio. We have a lot of fans in Ohio today. That's kind of interesting. Thanks for watching, everybody that is in Ohio. And we'll pull up some of the next items here that we'll give away in a bit. It's a Genesis water bottle. We have a Ford Shelby GT paperweight. This one's really heavy. So hopefully someone lives close where shipping won't be too expensive. And then we have a lot of random stuff here. So stack that all up and dive into the next question. Swag. There we go. It's called Swag. Sorry for the wrong name there. So yes, passing on the swag. I've always thought that swag was kind of an odd thing to do anyway. I mean, some of it's to remind you of the product, but like really, how many paperweights does one human need? I would argue none, but that's just me. And how many hats can we possibly use as well? Dr. Dre is asking Aviator versus XC90. Ooh, that's an interesting question there. And I'm going to throw a little bit of shade at Lincoln right now because Lincoln, you have never sent me the Aviator and it looks gorgeous and it looks like a lot of fun. And on the surface of things, I might be tempted to say Lincoln Aviator versus XC90, but since I've never driven it, I'll go with XC90. So Lincoln, if you're watching, definitely rectify that. Moving along here. Have you heard that Nissan will kill Datsun? Well, that's not surprising because they've killed Datsun before. And honestly, the whole Datsun thing versus the whole two-name thing just never made sense to me. So I think that Datsun's time has well and truly run out. Let's see here. Why did Honda's reliability tank while the Koreans were climbing? Honda suffered a lot in reliability due to infotainment issues, honestly. When we take a look at the reliability numbers, remember that a lot of the reliability metrics out there are not talking about true did it break reliability, but did you like it reliability? And that factors into both Consumer Reports and J.D. Power's numbers. Consumer Reports to a lesser degree, but J.D. Power's a little bit more strongly. And Honda falls down where it comes to infotainment, reliability, ease of use, that sort of thing. There definitely have been some problems there. Honda also seems to have taken a stumble when it comes to using the ZF 9-speed automatic transmission, but here we have to be really careful because the ZF 9-speed caused a lot of initial issues in Honda's product line, but not a lot of true reliability problems. So a lot of people didn't like the way that it shifted. They went back to the dealer. The dealer said, I've never seen a transmission shift that way. That transmission's bad. Let's stick a new one in there. And Honda put a lot of new transmissions in vehicles with transmissions that were operating as designed. It just is not going to feel as smooth as Honda's 10-speed or Honda's 6-speed, but dealers and customers didn't know that, didn't know what to expect, and there were a lot of warranty claims as a result that hurt their reliability metrics. But when we dissect those numbers and take a look at what ZF and Honda have said after the fact, when they've gone back and done a post-mortem on them, not true reliability problems. So a little bit tricky there. Moving on here. Thanks, Travis, for the super chat. Ford Escape 2020 Titanium or Mazda CX-5 Signature, each with top engine. Purchase, not lease, or neither. Ooh, that is a good question. I would probably go for CX-5 Signature. I like Mazda's 2.5-liter turbocharged engine. There's a lot of hype around it. Mazda has their own way of looking at these things, but it is a great engine regardless of the hype. The transmission, I'm a little bit less enthused about. That 6-speed is getting pretty old, and that is definitely a problem for them when it comes to the Mazda 6. But when it comes to the CX-5 Signature, it's quite different because you look at the competitive set, and nobody else has that much torque. Nobody else has acceleration that is that good outside of a very limited number of options out there. And oddly enough, the Rav4 Prime, which will give you that kind of acceleration. But the Mazda CX-5 is gorgeous inside and outside. A little bit cramped in the back seat, but I can forgive it that. The infotainment system is horrific. I really, really don't like Mazda's infotainment system, but it has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto support, so you can avoid the vast majority of interactions with Mazda's own interface. And to be perfectly frank, I deliberately, in every new car we drive, I deliberately try and spend one day not using CarPlay and using the manufacturer's interface, and then the entire rest of the week with the car, I just use CarPlay because it's just so much easier and a more consistent theme. But the Mazda interface is not my preference there in that one. But I think the rest of the CX-5 is good enough that I would go that direction. And I would say if you CX-5'd and you want to handle better, you can definitely swap out those tires for grippier tires. And it has the suspension and chassis tuning, I think, that could handle that well. And again, the acceleration. So that is definitely how I would go there, I think. Let's see here. Ramon is saying, I believe Nissan was owned by a computer company back in the day when they came to the U.S., and that was the reason they stuck with dots and then kept it ugly. Yes, there was definitely a lot of lawsuit going on there. That mainly had to do with Nissan trying to sue the computer company and the computer company winning. The computer company wasn't going after Nissan Motors. It was the opposite direction, so that wasn't a reason that Nissan went with Datsun. There was greater Nissan branding thought put into that one, but that was definitely a factor for the Nissan.com part, but not that part initially. Moving on here, do you think Hyundai global sales will rise to 10 million like Volkswagen and Toyota? I would not be surprised. Let's see here. Moving along here, we're going to give away some more things. So let's pull some names out of the hat. Our first one is the Shelby Paperweight. That is going to Samil Patel in Chevy Chase, Maryland. So you are getting a Paperweight. There we go. And if I can pull tape off my desk. Next one is a Thermo Fisher Scientific water bottle. I have no idea where that exactly came from. Oh well, it's a Thermo Fisher Scientific water bottle. And this is going to Shivam in Sandy Springs, Georgia. Then we have a GR Supra picture book. So this one was kind of interesting. Some manufacturers will deliberately send us things to give away, so that's kind of handy too. And Toyota sent us this one specifically to give away, I believe. And this is all on the new Supra. It's sort of a coffee table book. I will not tape anything to that one. And that's going to Aaron in Hollywood, California. Aaron Palomachuk. I have no idea how to pronounce that, but that book is yours. I'll just stick that right in there. And moving back to questions here, I bought an Acura MDX last month. 9-speed is fine now, plus test drives, not so good. That's interesting, Darren. So did they do any software updates on your 9-speed? I'd be interested to see, because I know Honda has had a ton of different software revisions. Interesting to see which one that vehicle has. Moving on here, GT 500 thing's pretty cool. RAV4 Prime or Model Y? Ooh, that is a tricky question. I would say it depends on your particular thoughts between EV, obviously, and plug-in hybrid. There's going to be some debate there about that. Let's see, what else is it? And, obviously, manufacturer reliability and fit and finish quality is going to be a thing. Model Y's fit and finish quality is not going to be great. The Model 3 that we had, not great. Reports on the Model Y indicate that it's worse than the Model 3, or at least the same as the early Model 3s. Remember that very few people paint their vehicles in a tent outside. That's not a thing other than a Tesla, and that's why we have so many paint defects, it seems, in modern Teslas. Hopefully they will fix that at some point. If Elon Musk decides to move his factory out of California, whatever, he will have to build a new factory, and maybe this time he can build a factory where they aren't painting vehicles outside in a tent. Moving on here. Do you think we'll see more automatic transmissions in the future with double transition shifts like the Chrysler 62 TE 6-speed? I wouldn't be surprised. It's always possible. Remember that transmissions have a lot of different ratios that are possible. The way that you can make power flow through the various transmission shift elements. More than 10 ratios are, for instance, possible in a Ford or GM 10-speed automatic transmission. They've just chosen the 10 that are best suited for those particular uses. But it's possible that you could come up with a transmission that had upshift and downshift variations for a wide variety of those different gears. It's just that they would produce ratios that are similar to one another, and so it seems like there's less of a point in doing that. That was theoretically the reason that Chrysler's rear-wheel drive 65 RFE, 55 RFE, and 45 RFE were all the same transmission, and it was a 4-speed, 5-speed, and 6-speed. It was designed initially to be a 5-speed essentially and a 6-speed transmission. It was one of the very first, actually I think it was the very first, world's first 5-speed and 6-speed automatic transmission. It's just that initially it was only programmed to use 4 of those ratios, and then they decided later to expand it out to 6 ratios. So that we see that in some transmissions out there. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw it again. Moving along here. Is Buick coming up with new models? Will they step up their exterior game? So the big thing with Buick is that they are coming up with new crossovers and new SUVs rather than new sedans. Exactly what that's going to look like, we will probably have to wait and see, but that's definitely going to be their direction. Moving on here, since mainstream brands are giving us luxury features, what's the point of luxury brands? Mainly, it's all about parts quality. So if you look inside, for instance, a BMW and a RAV4, you will get ventilated seats in the RAV4. You can get, certain stitching elements. You'll get LED headlights. You'll get Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, etc. But generally speaking, you're not going to get that next level of feature set. So you're not going to get massaging seats. You're not going to get some of the newer, more bleeding edge safety technology that we see pretty much only in luxury vehicles. Obviously, the parts quality is going to be very different. So fewer soft touch materials, fewer slush molded plastics, less premium touch points. Generally speaking, leather quality goes up. Dealer quality, generally speaking, goes up. Dealers are generally held to a different standard in the luxury segment. Generally speaking, warranties get longer. So it's a whole boatload of things. For instance, if you take a look at a Honda versus an Acura, something like the Acura ILX versus the Civic, that's kind of an awkward comparison in a way, but you're going to get a dual clutch transmission, not a CVT, and the dual clutch is a little bit more expensive to build. In the ILX, you're going to get a longer warranty, which is the big difference between the two. Longer drivetrain warranty, longer bumper-to-bumper warranty. That accounts for a reasonable amount of the price difference between a Civic and an ILX. And you're going to get a generally speaking, better dealer experience. You'll really notice that if you go to a Lexus dealer versus your average Toyota dealer, for instance. That's generally what you end up paying for. Cadillac XT6, yay or nay? I'm torn on the XT6. The XT6 would be totally fine if it was at least $10,000 less expensive. The problem with the XT6 is that for the same price, you can get a Lincoln Aviator with more power, better handling, a nicer interior, etc. I think that's the real problem. And logically, there are people out there that want to buy American. Maybe they live in an area of the country where you don't have foreign luxury dealers, and this is definitely a thing to consider. If you live in Middle America, you could buy a Lincoln or a Cadillac, and you could service it at a Ford dealer or the average General Motors dealer if you needed to. And you're not going to be able to service your BMW X5 at a Ford dealer for warranty. It's just not going to be a thing. And so I think that is the biggest threat to the XT6 is the Aviator, because it fits into that same category. Moving along here, Mist is asking, are PHEVs less profitable than ICE in general? Oh yes, anytime you add a battery to something, it's going to be less profitable. Whether we're talking about a hybrid or a plug-in hybrid or a full battery electric vehicle, they're going to be less profitable. In fact, in general terms, most of the plug-in hybrids that we see out there are probably being sold at a loss, unless it's a luxury hybrid. So the likelihood is that Kia, Hyundai, Ford, General Motors, Chrysler, etc., they're all losing money on their plug-in hybrids. And that loss gets bigger the more batteries you add to something. So by the time you get to a full EV, they really lose money. And we're talking vast quantities of cash on every EV out there. If you take a look at Tesla's financials, for instance, Tesla loses a lot of cash on every electric vehicle that they sell. And that is, quite frankly, the reason that we see companies like Toyota and Honda not making full battery electric vehicles. Toyota is the kind of company that really does not like to lose money. They will make money-losing models in certain areas because they think that future technology needs to be expanded, and there's a hope for that. But they don't seem to see that mass EV production is at that point yet. So with hybrids, for instance, Toyota's hybrids were definitely losses at the beginning, but they've gotten that technology to the point where regular hybrids are profitable. Not as profitable as a non-hybrid, obviously, because there's more expense, but definitely profitable. We think that they are at a point now in industry analysis speak where plug-in hybrids may be profitable soon. So like the RAV4 Prime is probably not going to be profitable for Toyota right away, but they likely see that it will be profitable soon. So they're going in that direction with some vehicles, the Prius Prime, the RAV4 Prime, etc. We see that sort of general direction. Something similar with hydrogen technology for them. But battery electric vehicles, they're a long way from being profitable because of the size of the battery. Tesla, any company can have a profitable quarter once in a while. So we are a long way from Tesla seeing profitable years financially, and even longer away from Tesla creating a profitable product that is profitable in its own right. It's important to remember that profitable quarters from Tesla include an awful lot of cash from selling credits, ZEV credits. So the way that zero emissions policy works in the United States and in Europe is that companies can create more polluting vehicles or avoid creating actual zero emissions vehicles by buying credits from other companies, buying or trading credits. So Tesla, since they're an all zero emissions company, they have a lot of credits banked up, and they can sell those credits to companies that need the credits to avoid paying government imposed fines. And that is one of the reasons that Tesla has that arrangement with FCA. So for instance, in FCA, they're paying millions and millions and millions of dollars every quarter, hundreds of millions of dollars every quarter just in Europe to sell credits to FCA. So we see something very similar in the United States. Lots of manufacturers are buying Tesla credits. We see Mercedes, we see FCA, we see other companies out there buying ZEV credits. We don't see that same logic within Toyota, for instance, because Toyota has a ton of hybrid vehicles that give them partial credits, and now they have a few plug-in hybrid vehicles to give them some credits as well. And so they don't need to buy credits in that same way that we see FCA, for instance. But if that gravy train of credit selling ever went away, you would see massive losses at a company like Tesla. Drew is asking, can Volvo extract more power out of its 2-liter engine without going hybrid? I'm wondering for the next generation XC90. That is a good question. So yes, they certainly could extract more power from the 2-liter turbo. We definitely see more power, for instance, in Mercedes 2-liter turbos, nearly 400 horsepower out of theirs in their AMG engines. However, I don't expect Volvo to go that route. I wouldn't be surprised if the next generation XC90 saw a modest power bump in the 2-liter turbo in its own right. It's probably still going to be a turbocharged and supercharged engine. It may be massaged to create a bit more oomph. 316 is already quite a lot out of an engine. Perhaps it could go to 325 or 340, something along those lines. But most likely, Volvo is going to be giving us more power out of their hybrid systems. So I would not be surprised, for instance, if their next generation T8 hybrid system went well beyond 400 horsepower, because that is the easier way to deliver power in these kinds of vehicles. Let's see here. Moving along, let's pull some more names out of the hat. And first one, we have Trong Lee from Richardson, Texas, getting a Genesis water bottle. So we'll pop that over there. And then we have, pulling things over here, we have a Volkswagen jacket. This is a puffy ski jacket from Roots 73 in Canada. And this is going to someone from Joshua Bartlett from Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. It's actually going to someone that might need a warmer jacket, so good thing it's not going to someone in Florida. We'll pop that over here. Then we have a Jeep Toque. Oh, also someone from Pennsylvania. Jeff Bakak from Jerriman, Pennsylvania. You are getting a Jeep Toque. Hopefully tape will actually stick to this. Oh, there's a little label in there. We'll stick it to the label. There we go. And then moving along, we have a cutting board from OMC Smokehouse. It's an Epicurious cutting board. I actually like these guys. I have some myself. Oh, and that's going to a blank one. That is going to Terry Starr from Spokane, Washington. And then one more item out of the bag. Randy Curry from Grand Rapids, Michigan. You are getting a little tiny Jeep Pelican case. I'm not entirely clear why you would want a little tiny Pelican case, but hey, it is watertight, crush-proof, and dust-proof. And it is a little bitty ruck case. Opens from the side, and I don't know, you can put things in there. Whatever things you might want. Anyway, do you think the hybrid system in the LC500 will be as reliable as a Prius system? In general terms, no. Obviously, it shouldn't be because it is more complicated. But still, in general terms, it is based around very, very durable, reliable components. The automatic transmission part has been essentially used. That same design has been used in Aisin transmissions practically since the dawning of time. And the hybrid component in that system is very reliable because it's basically a version of their existing hybrid technology. So in general terms, it's probably going to be as reliable as the average automatic transmission out there, but also, generally speaking, not quite as reliable as the Toyota Prius system. Moving along here, do you think the Fiat 500X, do you love the Fiat 500X? Could you tell people to buy it, to say Fiat, I love Fiat? Can we see a Fiat 500L review? I've actually asked for a 500X for a review here, and I don't know when it's going to come. Hopefully it will be here soon. Do you get better visibility when the headlights are lower on the bumper? That's an interesting question. Generally speaking, headlight position doesn't matter as much, honestly. I guess theoretically in fog, you could get a slightly better view of the road, but it's not going to be a huge amount because we're not talking about a great distance when it comes to headlight position. Generally speaking, headlight position is more about styling because they could both be in the middle, they could be at the far extremities of the front of the vehicle. It wouldn't matter that much in general terms. Let's see here. Thoughts on the Camry all-wheel drive and the new Highlander 2020? Well, there's a Highlander 2020 video coming out, and there's also a Camry all-wheel drive video out, so I would suggest heading over and viewing those. Let's see here. Why does Infiniti have such bad interiors? Some are worse than Nissan's. Manufacturers, generally speaking, will design their interiors in almost a vacuum. So not many companies, luxury divisions and mainstream divisions share the same design team. And I think that's definitely true, or really highlighted, rather, when we take a look at vehicles like the last generation Avalon and the last generation Lexus ES. I think arguably the last generation Avalon had some more premium componentry in it than the last generation Lexus ES. So it just tends to happen that way. They're looking at their own competitive sets, not necessarily looking at their in-house competition. But I would say that part of the problem for Nissan and Infiniti is that some of their models are getting pretty old. So the Q60 and the Q50 are really not spring chickens at this point in time. Overall interior parts quality, I would think, is still good in the Q60 and Q50. It just doesn't, the styling is more the problem there, I think. The components and the parts quality is at the competition's level, but the style makes it feel a little bit older, and I think that is a little bit of a disappointment. I kind of wish that Nissan had spent the extra cash when they redesigned the infotainment system to just delete the two-screen thing, stick one screen in the hole. I would have logically thought that they didn't even have to modify the software, because it could have just been one screen running the same software and the two halves didn't do anything. They didn't interact, but at least they could have just been on one screen. I think that would have looked cleaner, but they didn't. Hey. Let's see here. Nathaniel's asking, what do we feel about the Jeep Compass? I like the Jeep Compass overall. I know it's gotten some negative press lately. I've talked to a few people that have recently had the Jeep Compass. It sells really well in its segment, honestly. It is up there with the Crosstrek. I think it actually might be the best seller in that segment this year. If not, it was last year. It's kind of a tweener vehicle, which helps it out a lot, and there's a decent amount of cash on the hood. So in a rational world, you're going to be getting thousands of dollars off, and that should put it price-wise similar to the CHR and the HRV, but it's going to give you a slightly bigger vehicle overall, big cargo area, decent back seat room. It's a good buy, I would say, overall. It's also going to be more off-road capable than the average entry in that segment. Probably not as reliable as the HRV or CRV. It's not going to be as efficient as the HRV or CRV either. But if you like that mini Grand Cherokee look and you want something that has a few more luxury features or is more off-road capable, then it's going to be a great option there. Let's see here. Moving on here. How successful do you think Peugeot will be in the U.S. when they arrive? Is there a market for them? I am intrigued by the French brands. I really kind of wish Citroën would come to the U.S. rather than Peugeot. But hey, I'll take what I can get. The big thing that I wonder about Peugeots is, will they be funky enough? Because I love me some funky French cars. And my complaint about some of their wares lately has been they're not weird anymore. There used to be a time where you got into a French car and you would say, why on earth did they do X? Why is this button here? Why, and why is our turn signal a toggle rather than a stalk? Like, what's going on here? Why is it that when I turn the steering wheel, the hub doesn't move? And the sad part, I think, about Peugeot is that a lot of the funkiness has just been excised. They're so mainstream. And I think that might make me a little sad. So, if we can have some funky French style and some funky French features, then I would be happy with Peugeot. And I would argue that without that, they might not sell that well. So moving on here, we have a Toyota lockdown. This one is one they sent us. A Toyota coronavirus lockdown activity set. We have a Toyota activity book, cars, coloring, mazes, and more. We have postcards, I think. Postcards with stamps, some playing cards, and some crayons. So, there we go. And that is going to, pulling a name here, that is going to Blank Ticket. There's a lot of blank tickets in here today. That is going to John Cavalengo from Asheville, North Carolina. So that will all go out on Monday. And then we are going to be raffling off some other things. So let's see here. So Carlos from Warrington, Pennsylvania. Carlos Moria, you are getting an Alex & Otto's lapel pin. Stick that right on there. And Pratine Damara from San Diego, California, you are getting an Alex & Otto's shirt. One right like this, and it says real detailed reviews on the back. It's just like the one that I'm wearing here, and you will be able to choose from a limited number of sizes. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of these guys in stock, but there are a number of sizes available. So I will just put these shirt ones in a separate pile, and we will email you, and you can tell us what size you would like, and we will try and get you as close as possible to the size, but we cannot guarantee it. And let's see, that is the extent of our giveaways. So we'll toss that over there. And moving along here, next question. On the Nissan Sentra CVT, did you notice discontinuing accelerating? So PMO on the Sentra, do you notice any discontinuity in accelerating with the planetary gear shifts in the CVT rests? No, it actually does it pretty smoothly. I haven't really noticed a problem on that transmission. Let's see here. What's the best used plug-in hybrid that isn't as slow as a slug? Seems like Volts can be had for $17,000. Would you consider others better off with new? The Volt's not bad acceleration-wise. Something like a Clarity actually is pretty quick. The Clarity has 200 horsepower, 212 horsepower. That's pretty swift. It is a little ugly, sadly. Any of the Volvos, there are actually a decent number of Volvo plug-in hybrids out there because Volvo has been one of the few luxury companies to really put a lot of plug-in hybrids out there. So you may be able to find some of them. They obviously wouldn't be slow. They're all 400 horsepower. Other than that, the vast majority of plug-ins have been more economy-focused models. So Volt I would have no problem with as far as a used car goes. The Volts have been pretty reliable, as have the battery packs because of the way they've been actively cooled. So I don't think that that's a problem there. Let's see here. Frank is asking, will we ever see return to cars with good outward visibility instead of reliance on cameras and sensors? We do see things like Subaru models seem to have a good focus on visibility. I was actually also surprised that the last Cherokee that we had really good visibility all the way around. So there are definitely cars out there that have good visibility, but you are right. A lot of camera systems have really allowed manufacturers to change certain design profiles and parameters. Part of this is due to side impact regulations. Sills had to get a little bit higher for side impact standards than they were before. And some of it is obviously styling. People like the styling of high belt lines. And then rear end crash requirements and crash designs have also required rear pillar designs to get chunkier and thicker, etc. And that has hampered rearward visibility, etc. So with that out of the way, we will take one last question here, and let's pull it off here. Any updates on the twin-turbo V6 and Acura's RDX, refresh TLX? Do you think any new model years may be delayed by COVID? I'm sure that there are going to be a ton of vehicles that are going to be delayed by COVID. We don't know how many or when, but as far as Acura's refreshed system, I was thinking that we probably would have seen it in New York. New York's auto show has been canceled. We assume that the LA Auto Show has also been canceled, but we don't know anything specific yet. It appears that employees at the LA Auto Show have been furloughed at a time where they would be hot and heavy on the planning. Vehicle manufacturers have said relatively officially that they're not so keen on the thought of the LA Auto Show in November yet. And Los Angeles, of course, has said that they will likely have large gatherings still banned at that time. So probably LA Auto Show is canceled as well. And that means that we don't know when some of these product launches will happen. So with that out of the way, everybody out there, stay healthy. Be sure and sign up for our next giveaway. You can again email itsaconspiracy@alexandautos.com if you want to get enrolled into the next giveaway. That again is probably going to happen in a few months because we don't have too many things to give away. That one may be more focused on Alex and Autos merch. Speaking of merch, if you want to buy Alex and Autos merch, there is a link down there. You can click through that and there is a ton of different stuff, including some Save the Amber Turn Signals merch. And I will see all of you next week. Have a good weekend.